All right. Ready to dive deep into Peter Thiel's 0 to 1.
Let's do it.
I'm fascinated by his whole framework for innovation and building, like really powerful businesses.
Yeah, he's got some, definitely some thought-provoking ideas in there.
So let's break it down for our listeners, the ones who are maybe just getting started with Thiel or want to really unpack his core concepts.
Yeah, great idea. I think one of the most fundamental things about Thiel's thinking is this distinction he makes between globalization and technology.
Right. That's right out of the gate. He's like, forget globalization.
Well, not exactly forget it, but he thinks we're way too focused on it.
Okay, so explain that. What does he mean by globalization versus technology?
He sees globalization as basically copying what already works. It's going from 1 to N, as he puts it. Just making more of the same.
Like opening another coffee shop on a street that already has
Yeah,
5 coffee shops.
exactly.
Okay, so then where does technology fit into this?
Technology for Thiel is about creating something truly new, something that didn't exist before. That's his 0 to 1 concept.
Going from 0 to 1. So it's like invention versus just replication.
Exactly. He uses China's rapid development as a prime example.
Oh, interesting.
They've mastered globalization. I mean, they're incredibly good at copying existing models, but they haven't focused as much on creating groundbreaking new technologies.
So he's saying copying is bad.
I wouldn't say bad. It has its place, but his point is that it won't lead to those, massive breakthroughs that really push humanity forward.
Okay, so he sees technology as the key to a better future, not just making more of what we already have.
Right. He's a big believer in the power of technology to solve problems and create new possibilities.
This is really interesting. But then, okay, so then he goes on to talk about monopolies. And that's kind of shocking coming from, a Silicon Valley giant.
Yeah, right. You'd think he'd be all about competition, but he actually flips the script on that whole idea.
So what's his take on monopolies?
He argues that real innovation, like the kind that leads to those 0 to 1 breakthroughs, actually leads to monopolies.
So if you create something truly valuable and unique, you naturally rise to the top.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He uses Google as an example. They built a search engine so good that it basically ended the search engine wars.
Yeah, they became the undisputed king of search.
Right. And that's what he means by monopoly. He's not talking about the evil, crush your enemies kind of monopoly.
Gotcha. So not like the robber barons of the Gilded Age.
No, not at all. He's talking about companies that become so good at what they do that no one else can really compete. And it's not because they're stifling competition through shady tactics or anything.
Right.
It's because they're offering something so much better that it just makes sense for everyone to use their product or service.
So they win because they're the best, not because they're playing dirty.
Exactly.
So this is a lot to unpack. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Thiel's ideas about, building a successful business.
For sure.
But I think it's a good starting point.
Yeah.
And it gives us a framework for understanding some of his more controversial or maybe counterintuitive ideas, like his take on competition versus monopoly.
Right. It's a different way of thinking about things. And I think it's really valuable, especially for entrepreneurs who are trying to, build something truly groundbreaking.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we'll dig even deeper into Thiel's 0 to 1 and explore some more of his fascinating and sometimes provocative ideas. Stay tuned.
Okay, so let's dig into some more of Thiel's ideas about how to actually build one of these, category-defining businesses that we were talking about.
Yeah, how do you go from 0 to 1, right? What are the practical steps? Does he give us a roadmap?
He does, kinda. I mean, he lays out some key principles, but it's not like a paint-by-numbers kind of thing.
Okay, so what are some of those key principles?
Well, remember we talked about PayPal being radically better than, all the existing payment systems?
Yeah, that was a game changer for sure.
Right, so Thiel calls this creating a 10x improvement. It's not about making something, slightly better than what's already out there. It's about being an order of magnitude better.
Wow. Okay, so think bigger, bolder, more groundbreaking than anyone else.
Exactly. He uses Amazon's early days as a great example. I mean, they didn't just open another bookstore, right?
They completely reimagined
Correct.
the whole experience of buying books.
Exactly. Their online model offered a way wider selection and a more convenient experience than any traditional bookstore.
So that's what he means by 10x. It's not just incremental improvement. It's like a quantum leap forward.
Right. And that gave them the foundation to expand into, all these other markets and eventually become the behemoth they are today.
The everything store, as they like to call it.
Exactly. But it's not just about starting with a bang, right?
Okay, so what else is there?
Thiel stresses the importance of what he calls strategic sequencing.
Okay, I haven't heard that one before. What's strategic sequencing?
It means you can't just jump into any market and expect to win, right? You have to be really smart about choosing your battles and making sure that, your strengths align with the market you're entering.
So even when you're on a roll, you can't just assume that success will automatically translate to every new venture.
Right. He uses eBay as as kind of a cautionary tale. They were incredibly successful, expanding from collectibles to this wide range of goods.
Yeah, they were the go-to place for, like, everything.
Right. But then their foray into more commodity products where the option model wasn't really as effective, that kind of hit a wall.
So their dominance in one area didn't necessarily guarantee success in another. They had to, like, rethink their strategy.
Exactly. So that's what he means by strategic sequencing. It's about picking the right battles at the right time.
Okay, that makes sense. So 10x improvement, strategic sequencing.
Hmm.
What else? What other tools does Thiel give us for building these, like, unstoppable businesses?
Well, he also talks a lot about network effects, especially in, the tech world.
Network effects. Okay, remind me what that means.
So it's basically the idea that the more people use a platform, the more valuable it becomes for everyone. Like, think about Facebook, right? The more people are on it, the more useful it is for connecting with friends and family.
Yeah, it's like a snowball effect, right?
Exactly. And Thiel points to Facebook's their initial strategy as a really smart example of this. Starting with a small, highly engaged user base, Harvard students, that allowed them to build this really tight-knit community and refine their product before going, mainstream.
Oh, that's really interesting. So counterintuitively, starting small can actually be a huge advantage.
Exactly. Because it allows you to build that initial momentum and establish a strong network effect before you try to, conquer the world.
That's a really powerful insight. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they're so eager to scale quickly that they might overlook the importance of building that solid foundation first.
Right. And Thiel would definitely agree with that. He's all about, laying the groundwork for long-term success. And then he also talks about economies of scale, especially for software companies.
Economies of scale. Okay, refresh my memory on that one too.
Sure. So it basically means that as a company grows, its costs per unit go down, right? Especially with software, the cost of producing another copy of a software product is practically zero.
Right. Once you've built it, you can just keep replicating it.
Exactly. So as the company grows, its costs per unit plummet, which gives them this massive advantage over, smaller competitors.
They can then offer lower prices, invest more in R&D, or just, rake in bigger profits.
Exactly. And of course, there's branding, which Thiel acknowledges is important, but he cautions against relying on it as your primary differentiator.
So no slapping a fancy logo on a mediocre product and calling it a day.
Right. He's all about substance over style.
That makes sense.
He contrasts Apple under Steve Jobs, who was obsessed with creating truly exceptional products, with Yahoo's attempts to revive its brand through, just superficial changes.
And in the end, it's the product that really matters.
Right. Branding should be the cherry on top, not the whole cake.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got 10x improvements, strategic sequencing, network effects, economies of scale, and branding. Anything else we should add to this, like monopoly building toolkit?
Well, he also talks a lot about definite optimism, which is it's kind of a core concept in his thinking.
Definite optimism. Okay, that sounds pretty self-explanatory, but I have a feeling Thiel gives it a deeper meaning.
He does. It's not just about being positive. It's like a whole different way of looking at the future.
Okay, so how does definite optimism differ from just being, optimistic?
Well, he contrasts it with what he calls indefinite thinking, which is kind of this, spread yourself thin approach where you try to be prepared for anything, but you end up lacking focus and a clear direction.
I see. So it's about having a specific vision for the future and then going after it with laser focus.
Exactly. And he believes that a lot of people operate from a place of, indefinite thinking.
Like they're hedging their bets, not really committing to anything specific.
Right. And he says that kind of mindset leads to mediocrity. He also calls out the obsession with a diversification in finance, for example.
Oh, yeah, just
Spreading your bets across a bunch of assets might feel safe, but it often leads to really underwhelming returns.
So definite optimism is about conviction,
Yeah.
about having a clear vision and the courage to pursue it relentlessly.
Exactly. And a big part of that is identifying your own secrets, as he calls them.
Secrets. Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
He's convinced that the world is like brimming with these untapped opportunities, these valuable truths that very few people agree with you on.
So it's about seeing the world differently, challenging assumptions, and spotting those golden nuggets that everyone else is missing.
Absolutely. So, we were talking about definite optimism last time.
Yeah, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around that
Yeah,
one.
it's a big idea, right? It's not just about like, being cheerful or whatever.
Right.
It's really a whole different way of approaching, well, everything really, but especially the future.
Okay, so remind me again how definite optimism is different from just plain old optimism.
So Thiel contrasts it with what he calls definite pessimism, and he actually uses China as an example here.
Oh, interesting. How so?
He says that even though they have this booming economy, right, there's this underlying current of like fear, this sense of maybe not really believing in the future they're building, like they're constantly worried about falling behind.
So they're playing catch up instead of like truly creating the future they want.
Exactly. And that gets to the heart of it.
Even if you're successful on the surface, if you're not driven by a belief in what you're doing, it's not going to be sustainable.
Right. And definite optimism is the opposite of that, right?
It's about having that deep conviction that a better future is possible and then actually putting in the work to make it happen.
And that kind of segues into another one of Thiel's kind of controversial ideas, which is his view of competition.
Oh, yeah, he's not a fan of competition, is he?
He really isn't. I mean, most people think of it as this, engine of progress, right?
Survival of the fittest, all that.
Exactly. But Thiel sees it as a major distraction, even a roadblock.
Really? How so?
Well, he argues that when companies get too focused on beating each other, they actually lose sight of what really matters, which is creating truly innovative and valuable products and services for the world.
It becomes more about winning than about like actually making something great.
Right. And in the process, everyone kind of loses. Even the winners end up worse off than they would have been if they hadn't been so caught up in the competition.
It's like that saying, in a war, everyone loses.
Exactly. Thiel actually compares business competition to war, where resources are wasted, profits shrink, and real progress is stifled. Like everyone's so busy fighting, they forget to actually build anything meaningful.
So is he saying we should just avoid competition altogether?
Well, not completely. I mean, he acknowledges that in some cases it's just unavoidable, but his point is that we shouldn't celebrate it as this inherent good,
Always a sign of a healthy market.
Right. Instead of obsessing over competition, he says we should focus on building businesses that are so exceptional that they transcend competition altogether.
Oh, right. That brings us back to monopolies.
Exactly. Which is why he sees monopolies as the natural outcome of true innovation, right?
When you create something truly valuable, you naturally rise above competition.
Right. And he actually argues that the negative perception of monopolies is often kind of misguided.
What do you mean?
We tend to think of them as these greedy corporations exploiting consumers, but he says that true monopolies, the ones that are built on real innovation and superior products, are actually good for society as a whole.
Oh, how so?
Well, because they have the resources and the breathing room to really invest in research and development, to focus on long-term breakthroughs that smaller companies, the ones that are constantly battling each other, just can't afford to do.
So he sees monopolies as engines of progress, not just these profit-hungry behemoths.
Right. And he points to companies like Google and Apple as examples, They've created monopolies, but it's not through shady tactics. It's through creating products and services that people genuinely love and rely on.
And then they've used that position to push the boundaries of technology in ways that have benefited, all of us.
Exactly. So that's kind of the big picture view of Thiel's philosophy.
It's about thinking big,
Yeah.
aiming for those 0-1 innovations, building businesses that transcend competition, and ultimately creating a better future for everyone.
Right. It's a pretty bold vision.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly inspiring. It's a call to action for entrepreneurs and really anyone who wants to make a real difference in the world.
Absolutely. And I think it's a message that's more relevant than ever, in a world that's facing so many challenges and
We
opportunities.
need more people who are willing to think differently, to challenge assumptions, and to really push the boundaries of what's possible.
Right. And I think that's what Thiel is trying to do with 0-1. He's not giving us all the answers, but he's giving us a framework for thinking about the future and our role in shaping it.
It's about empowering us to create the world we want to live in.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message.
It is. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Peter Thiel's 0 to 1, I hope you, our listener, are walking away with a renewed sense of possibility, a sense that you too can be a part of building a better future.
And that you don't have to follow the crowd, you know? You can forge your own path, discover your own secrets, and create something truly extraordinary.
Thiel's book is a reminder that the future is not predetermined. It's something that we create through our choices and our actions.
So go out there and make it happen.
Thanks for joining us in this deep dive into 0 to 1. We'll see you next time.